Alright. The last one exported in a really weird file format that Premiere doesn't like, and I don't feel like converting it, so we're doing it over. The good news is that means I actually know what I'm going to try and say this time, so hopefully I won't need to cut a bunch of parts out of this one where I've completely stalled and haven't been able to find the blueprints. Anyway, without any further ado, this ought to be a From the Depths mech leg tutorial. So a lot of people like to use ACB or breadboard style legs. I've never tried either of those. I don't think they work as well as this type, which I'm going to call orbiting legs for a lack of a better term, counter-rotating legs. Whatever you like, it's just spin blocks, essentially, working on their own. No input required. But, they get the job done, so I'm going to show off some of my designs, show off some that don't work, tell you why they don't work. I probably won't tell you how to fix them, because that would require a lot of recording time that I don't think anyone really cares about. Anyway, let's get to it. First things first, I would like to introduce you to the most basic type of counter-rotating / orbiting leg there is. This is essentially one spin block set to go forward and one spin block set to go backwards. And that's it. A leg part and a foot part. Their setup is really simple. This one's set to go exactly as fast as this one, if I remember correctly. There's no real trick to it. You might have to mess with the angles so that they spawn in the correct positions. For this one, you can see one set of legs is at a 180-degree offset to the other to get that stepping motion. But it's all really straightforward. This is the simplest leg, and everything I'm going to show you is based on this general principle. There's going to be some extra joints, some extra tricks, some, many more things to break, many more things that don't work, but this is the general idea. If you remember that this is the effect you're trying to get, you can't go wrong. So, actually, before we talk about feet, I'll mention one other thing, because I might come back to it. Because this piece, the leg piece, is 2 meters long, that gives you a 2 meter high step height. And because this one is 4 meters long, that keeps you 3 meters long, is it? That gets you, 1 meter ground clearance, and at its lowest, pretty simple. If you want a taller leg, make the leg longer. If you want a bigger circle, make this leg longer. Obviously, the problems you'll run into are that if you spin it too fast, it'll bounce around like crazy and it won't grip the ground. So this super simple leg is only good for something really slow. And if you make it too long, it'll step too deeply into the ground on each step. You see, it's only going quite shallowly into the ground, so it can't throw itself into the air, but with a longer leg, even at slower speeds, you'll get a very unstable walk. So that's the limitation of the very simple leg, all very obvious. And before we go on to something better, let's just quickly talk about feet, because feet are weird to set up too, and they're worth talking about. So stickiness, usually you want that as high as you want, because that's essentially how much grip you have. If you set it too low, you'll slip. Sometimes you'll want to slip. Usually you won't. With clearance, also pretty obvious. With 1 meter clearance, you start to get grip about 1 meter below the bottom of the foot. If you set it longer, you'll grip sooner. If you set it lower, you'll grip later. Since this has such a small step height, you're fine with it set at 1, but you'll want a lower clearance, just so that you're not shuffling backwards and forth and never really disconnecting with the ground. So for forward friction, typically you want that set to 1. You'd think forwards friction means, friction when the leg moves forward, when the foot moves forward. It's not. Think of it the same as, say, a propeller on a ship. If your forwards friction is 1, that's the same as your resting drive being 1. Forwards friction is friction that moves you forwards, not friction in the forwards direction. I know that's confusing. Just take my word for it. This is what you set it to if you want it to work. For yaw, you can set your right and your left if you really want. Feet aren't great at turning. I don't really like them, especially this design where you can only run, you generally aren't going to change the way the legs move. So there's not much point changing the friction in there, but you can if you want. Backwards friction, generally the same idea. Normally I would have that set to 0 just so it can't drag itself backwards if it falls over or flip itself or do anything weird. But you can mess with that if you want. All pretty straightforward. All stuff you can figure out on your own. So let me show you a slightly more advanced design. This, if I can find it, is King Slap. He should be in here somewhere. Built for the Mecha Melee tournament. Hosted by Chromatid. Sorry if I get the name wrong. Chromatoid. Excellent tournament. And these are the legs. So, as you can see, there's a lot more going on in the simple legs, but it's the same general design. Some spinners spin one way, some spinners spin the other way, and the end result is the leg moves. So I'll slow it down as much as I can. I'll show you which parts are doing what and why, and I'll tell you why it doesn't work. So first things first, let's come to this leg. It's essentially just look from this joint downwards, because that's the only part moving up and down. That's the simplest part of the leg that we're going to look at. You see, you still have your main driving limb going in one big circle, and you still have, in yellow, your foot part that's counter-rotating and keeping it flat. That's all really simple. All that extra joint is doing is spinning opposite the main leg, and that's where the orbit part comes in. So the general idea is, if you have two circles spinning the same way and one is smaller than the other and they're offset by 180 degrees, not that any of the technicality really matters, what you get is not a circular movement like on the other leg, but much more of an oval, which is why this leg takes a nice flat step at the bottom and a nice flat step at the top, and does most of its up and down movement right on the end there, right at the start and end of the gate cycle. Now, if you've been watching closely, and I haven't put you to sleep yet, you will have noticed that there's a really weird stutter at the bottom of the step. The foot seems to freeze on the ground. And if that looks wrong to you, you're absolutely right. The reason for that is that these legs are kind of broken. Not so broken that they won't move you forward, but the spinning is set up wrong. And I'll show you the wrong part. I won't show you how to fix it, but I'll show you what a working one looks like. So you see the second joint on the bottom part of the leg. When the leg comes down, it's going opposite the direction of the main leg. And that's why it stops at the bottom there. Because this middle joint should be spinning the same way. It should stroke back when the main leg strokes back and strokes forward when the main leg strokes forward. So the way to fix that is you got to go into each of those two joints at the bottom, reverse both of them and flip the speeds so that the middle leg is going at 8 and the other one's going at 4 instead of what I've got. Another way this can go wrong, it isn't here, but if you notice that you're taking a much deeper step than you want, it's because you'll have your angles set wrong. You can have them set at 90 degrees off to what they're meant to be and at 180 if it's really bad. So if you're not getting that nice flat step, or if you're having a stuttering issue, those are the two things you need to check. I'm not going to show you the fixing process because it's just trial and error. Change one thing, delete the mech, load it in again. You get used to it eventually. That's a broken leg. Finally, let me show you what it looks like when it's set up properly. Also built for Chromatid's Mecha Melee tournament. This is the Return of the King. Quite ugly, so I'll just get you to look at the legs. If you watch, when the main leg steps back, the subjoint also steps back. When the main leg steps forward, the subjoint also steps forward. That's why this foot doesn't have any stuttering or freezing issues at the bottom of its step. The top joint, which we're finally going to get to now, is the exact same as the bottom joint. One main leg, one sub leg, which gives us a more even step, and then one ankle part to remove the rotation. That's only there to bring the leg into the midline so it doesn't generate weird torque when it, moves through its stroke. So it's essentially two of the bottom leg parts stuck together. Really basic, easy to build if, you've already got a working prefab. You can stick them on anything. ACBs can't get knocked out. You don't have to worry about setting up timing. It just works. And another nice point is, if your mech is moving too slowly, just double the speed in the spin blocks. The only real limit on these things is the speed at which you start to clip into the floor, or start to launch yourself into the air. You can kind of reduce that with the counter rotating. Legs like these will easily get you up to around 80 meters per second. Actually, now that I remember, I do have one other leg that I'll show off. It's essentially the same as the original super simple leg, but taken to... Oh no, it's the same as this one with the multiple joints, but taken to the absolute logical extreme. It's spinning backwards, but it's essentially one big counter-rotating piece to create a really small step that moves through a lot of space in very little time. That makes you move really quickly, with very little shudder launching you into the air. This is the leg that gets you up to 80. These ones are crap by comparison. But yeah, have some extra jets to stabilize and turn and whatever else, and you'll be building mechs in no time. I think that's just about everything, so I'll spare you the pain of having to hear my voice anymore. We'll call that a wrap.